Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Labi.
Welcome back. I'm Tundra Abiola.
Voters' apathy, voter buying, and allegations of manipulation yesterday marred the supplementary governorship and state assembly elections in some states of the country. The governorship segment of the polls took place in 5 states: Kano, Sokoto, Benue, Plateau, Bauchi, while the state assembly versions was held in 18 states. In Kano, journalists were attacked when thugs disrupted the electoral process and chased voters away at one of the polling units in Nassarawa local council. The development led the People's Democratic Party, PDP, to call for the cancellation of the March 23rd makeup polls and declaration of its governorship candidate, Abaji, as the winner based on the March 9 results. A similar incident also happened in Benue State, where hoodlums disrupted the process and burnt election materials. Has 2019 general elections improved or retarded Nigerian democracy? One may ask. While joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Adetokunbo Peaerse, SDP Chieftain and former SDP governorship candidate of Lagos. Welcome to the program this morning, sir.
Morning.
So as we talk, before we get into what happened yesterday, I wanted us to sort of take a look and reflect a little bit about the past the two elections that's happened last month and this month, and also talk a little bit about the cancellation that also didn't happen, that has actually paved the way for some of the apathy, I think, that we've continued to see over the last month and a half when it comes to elections. As a member of a third party and a third party wave that we saw this time around bigger than before, and we really were hoping that there would be a bigger dent when it came to a third force, as it has been referred to during the elections. As you come in today to talk and reflect with us on the elections, how do you, as someone that has committed your life to the democratic process, feel about our democracy today?
Well, the Nigerian democracy is certainly in jeopardy. You asked the question earlier if things are better or worse. It seems that this particular round of elections is taking us way back in time. We have not made any progress. Things are really in retardation. And I think it speaks to the general challenges facing Nigeria's development. And as a person who's always argued for what is termed restructuring, which simply means reconfiguring the way the country is supposed to run, I feel that until we begin to look at fundamental changes in the structure of the country, we'll never make progress. We'll keep doing the same thing again and again. You remember late President Yaradua actually confessed that his election was very faulty. So what have we done since then? All the attempts to reevaluate INEC election rules have been thwarted by this particular president, Bwari, and therefore it was obvious from the beginning that these elections were going to be very, very disheartening and very disruptive and very discouraging to the progress of democracy in Nigeria. You probably remember that a few months before this election, former President Obasanjo and several other people and many international observers were of the opinion that there was not going to be a free and fair election, that the president is going to do everything to remain in office. Bwari didn't help matters either when he said he cannot lose. I mean, how can you go into a competition and say you cannot lose? It was as if he would congratulate a winner if he didn't win. He said he cannot say that because he will congratulate himself. You know, look, there have been many things along the line that indicate that there will be no open, free, and fair election. So what we are getting now is simply to be expected. So unless we change fundamentally the way we do things, for instance, INEC, the whole system of INEC is so faulty. I mean, how can the president appoint the chairman of INEC and we expect the INEC chairman to be independent? It's not independent. It cannot be. This is the only country I know today where we do things like this. Everybody on the board of INEC is also appointed by the president. How can you be, you are competing, you're part of a competition and you are deciding the rules? So you are going into a game and you appoint the referee. How do you expect us to believe that that person can be independent? And we can see that we have not had any. I'm not talking about just this administration, because the challenges we're talking about now is not just about today Nigeria under Buhari. It is about reorganizing this country as a whole. Nobody can govern this country as it is and hope to make any progress. We'll just make a little bit here, we gain on one hand, we lose on the other hand. That's what's going to happen unless we change everything around. INEC must be restructured, as the whole of the country must be restructured. That is the only way we can make any progress. There's so many things hanging on this election. You know, they're talking about minimum wage, they're talking about all sorts of things. How are you going to pay 30,000 naira minimum wage? Where is the money going to come from when the economy is in such disarray? You know, so, and when you have elections like this, where everything is disrupted, where they're snatching ballot boxes, you remember the presidential election was so violent and so disruptive in Lagos, as we know, because I was here, that people didn't want to come out for the next election. And we saw voter apathy because nobody was interested. They assumed that, look, no matter what we do, APC is going to win because they have everything organized to win. I can tell you from my own experience that if you put up posters, I was actually at home the day the APC candidate for assembly was going through my street campaigning just before the governorship election. When I got out at the end of the day, every single poster of mine on my street had been removed, disappeared, didn't even see a sign of it, and some Olu poster all over the place on my street. That's the kind of election we had. So people were scared to even participate. So unless these things change, and the only way they can change is if we have fundamental change. You cannot have an election in a state and hope that that election will be free and fair when the local electoral commission is completely controlled by the state government. So if it's in the PDP state, it is very unlikely that anybody who's not PDP is going to win any election in that state. So this is what we get. This is not democracy. Democracy is the principle of equal opportunity for all.
But we have had states where incumbents haven't won, and we've had one presidential election where an incumbent didn't win. What do you think we did differently then?
We didn't do anything differently. Let's not fool ourselves. Where you had Jonathan didn't win was because Jonathan was magnanimous enough. Number one, he did not fire Jeddah when he should have done, because Jeddah was already prejudiced. Because the fact that he appointed Jeddah doesn't mean that Jeddah would do his bidding, but Jeddah was doing bidding of a political party. This is the point. So if he was like any other president, such as Bwari, he would have fired Jeddah a long time ago, just as the President Buhari made sure that the Chief Justice of Nigeria was removed before he came, so that when the elections, everybody saw it in the whole world, that this Chief Justice was removed, so that in case there's a challenge to the results of the election, he would not be the one to judge the matter. So now we have a total disarray. Look, exceptions to the rule, if in one place or the other, the incumbent doesn't win, notice the fight for anybody to win if they don't if that party doesn't control the state. So it happens, but it's exception to the rule. But more importantly, I'm talking about local government election, which haven't come yet. Virtually every state, and don't forget, the local government is the closest to the people. So we tend to overlook that election, but it's the most fundamental and the very important election. Hardly will you find any state controlled by a political party where the local government chairman will be from another party, because the local electoral board is 100% appointed and controlled by the state government.
I want your take on the spate of inconclusive elections that happened, well, yesterday, with the exception of Adamawa State. Inconclusive elections are not novel. It's just with this election, the frequency that INEC declared elections inconclusive. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the presidential election that was postponed was an indication of the lack of preparedness of INEC for anything. For instance, before the presidential election, and of course till to date, over 1 million Nigerians registered to vote never got their PVC. INEC was not ready for the first election, postponed a week. Within a week, it was not ready. The presidential election was a farce. It was not ready. And now you could see it in the next elections, that things were not in place. And you also have the problem of honesty and integrity in the officers of the INEC. Wherever you find inconclusive election, it is usually where the APC is not winning. If there's any sign that the APC candidate is going to win, that election will not be inconclusive. So how can we therefore trust this judgment of inconclusive elections? And when you have it, for instance, I'll give you an example of one of the inconclusive elections in Lagos State, in Ojo local government, House of Reps. The PDP candidate, the first round, had 30,000 votes more than the APC candidate. They said it couldn't be. So they recounted, and they reduced the tally to 3,000. So the PDP candidate had 3,000, more than the APC. And INEC declared it inconclusive. So they had a rerun. But because of the overwhelming support of the people for the PDP candidate, he still emerged. The point I'm making is, if it was anything close, INEC could have given it to the APC candidate. INEC could have said it's inconclusive.
Hold that thought, sir. We need to expand on that a bit more. But now we go to our Arise News correspondent, Nisi Gabriel, reporting from Kano State with updates on the collation of results underway. Good morning, Nisi.
Yeah, good morning.
What do you make of the whole electoral process in Kano State?
The whole electoral process, one cannot comfortably say that it was free and fair as at yesterday, because the whole voting process as at yesterday, from reports we've gathered so far, there were reports of voter intimidation, thugs being imported into the states to actually disrupt the process in some local government area. One which I witnessed at the early hours of yesterday was at Dala local government area, in one of the wards in Dala local government area, where thugs came in to disrupt the process. But through the help of the Nigerian police force and other security agencies, they were able to bring normalcy to that particular ward in Dala local government area. That I witnessed myself. But we also, one of the focal points in these Kano elections, and one place that has been of key interest, with so much concentration on is Gama local government in Gama ward, in Nassarawa local government area of Kano State, where there were so much violence, reported violence, lynching of journalists, voter intimidation in that particular Gama ward in Nassarawa local government.
Wow, Nisi, how is this affecting the collation process? Can you give us an update on the collation process, Nisi?
Yeah, the collation process started as of yesterday, let's say 8:30 to 9, and it's ended as about to 1 in the morning, and it has been going so well. As expected, there's so much reaction from party agents. The collation so far, we've received results from 26 local government areas in Kano State. So we have 2 more to go, which is the Kibia local government and Nassarawa local government area in Kano State. Mind you that Nassarawa local government area is always the last to be read, and that area is it. So for even the last election, before the supplementary election, Nassarawa local government area has always been a recurring problem. Both parties will try so much to garner votes from that particular area, and this is the area of key contest. So Nassarawa, we are expecting the result of Nassarawa local government area as I speak to you. The collation process is supposed to resume at 8 a.m. this morning, but from information we've gathered so far is that they are still yet to collate to get the result of Nassarawa local government area. So we are waiting for the result of Nassarawa local government area, then the collation process can commence this morning. And it's also important to know that Nassarawa local government area in Kano State has one of the largest polling units in this supplementary election, about 6 to 8 polling units thereabouts in this election. So it's a big, the figures that will be emanating from this particular local government is actually, it's a swing local government, I must say, because it might actually change the whole narrative of these supplementary elections. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you. Do you know when we expect the collation to be completed today?
Now, this is about some minutes to 8:30, and from the information we've gathered, just as I stated earlier, is that they are expecting the results of Nassarawa local government area. So the whole INEC officials are present. They are in the premises, waiting for that results from that particular local government before they can commence the whole process. But give and take, let me give an estimate. I can say, let's say 12 noon, 1 thereabouts, we should be getting a feel of what is going to happen, or we should be knowing who the winner is going to be from this from Kano State supplementary elections. Back to the studio.
Local government does have the highest number of registered voters. What was the turnout like? Did those registered voters turn out in force to vote? And how have party agents been reacting to all the results announced so far?
Yeah, that's a very, very fantastic question. Nassarawa local government has the largest number of voters, about 40,000 registered voters in that particular local government. And voter turnout has been really, really high, I must say. High voter turnout in Nassarawa local government area. But one thing that has been a bone of contention, and one thing that has been troubling a lot of party agents, a lot of both sides of the party, most especially the People's Democratic Party, is the fact that in these particular local governments, there have been the allegations that their party agents have been harassed, voter intimidation, so they are not really comfortable with the whole process. And they are not, as of yesterday, the state party chairman, the person of Rabi Suleiman, actually held a press conference stating that, calling for the cancellation of this whole supplementary election, because they don't believe that it's going to reflect the genuine interest, or the genuine interest of what's a genuine reflection of the voters, of what the voters have actually, the votes have casted. So a lot of allegations and counter-allegations by both sides of the divide. But Nassarawa, as of yesterday, the voter turnout in Nassarawa local government area is actually high. And coming back to the second phase of your question, how are party agents reacting to this whole process? As of yesterday, I must tell you, a lot of questions emanating from this particular collation center, from the PDP party agents, APC party agents, most especially the Dala local government area. It's a lot of questions came up from that particular local government area due to the fact that the total number of registered voters, the figure the collation officer had, differed from what the returning officer had in his own sheet. So those are questions that actually begs for answer. And most of the reports the collation officer brought to this collation room yesterday was the fact that in areas where we actually saw violence, areas where we got reports that violence actually occurred in those particular areas. The collation officers sat right here in front of me, and they read their result sheet. They read out their reports, and virtually, let me give and take, 70% of them kept on saying that no violence occurred, no violence occurred, no votes counted. So it was more like a recurring decimal yesterday, and the party agents kept on asking questions, kept on asking the returning officer who sat right here at my back. They were asking him that they have evidence, they have footages, videos that are already viral on the social media indicating that violence was actually occurred in those particular areas. So they were so surprised that these professors, the collation officers, came out to say that no violence occurred in this particular ward or local government. Back to you in the studio.
I have a question for you about Gamma Ward, where eyewitness accounts are emanating from there, claiming that some of the thugs were actually wearing T-shirts bearing party logos. However, those parties have not been identified. Are you in a position to confirm these reports, and what party logo was on their T-shirts?
I'm not in the position to confirm that report. I must tell you the honest truth. But as at yesterday when we got to Gamma area, the whole atmosphere was really tense. We had to actually run for safety because even the security agencies, personnel on ground rather, they were being overzealous because getting your cameras over there to get footages actually became a problem. So it was more like the security agencies giving cover to some particular set of people who I cannot really identify or say they were party A or party B. But those reports really emanated from Gamma local government area. Gamma local, just like I rightly pointed out, Gamma local government area is actually a contentious area in this particular supplementary election in Nassarawa local government area. Gamma ward is a really contentious ward in this supplementary elections. And as of yesterday, one of my colleagues, who is also a journalist, was actually molested, intimidated by many of the security agencies. They called it the RIT squad. He was actually molested, intimidated, taken to the headquarters of the Nigerian Police Force before he was actually released. So Gamma local government area was a really volatile place as at yesterday. So that report might be true, it might be false. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much. That was Nisi Gabriel, a Rise News correspondent, reporting live from Kano State.
Back here, we heard the update from our correspondent on the ground in Kano. Once again, what are your? When you look at the level of violence and actually some of the facts that even media is not safe, our journalists are not safe. I saw images yesterday of journalists that actually were bleeding, but once again, we can't confirm those images because they were from social media. What do you say about these supplementary elections in Kano?
Well, you see, you can confirm that. Your man, Mr. Gabriel, just told you that people were attacked. They saw it.
They
so
did.
It's happening.
The images I saw, the ones I saw online, I
but
can't confirm.
this is going on generally. But I think that, again, very predictable, where you have a presidential candidate that says that if he doesn't win an election, the dog and the baboon will soak in blood. You have a presidential candidate or leaders of a party who say that if they don't win this election, they're going to set up their own government. You know, you have that was the 2015 election. So it's been consistent. This one, you had a governor of a state, a major stakeholder in the APC, saying that international observers who come here to get involved in the election will go back in body bags. You see, once you have all of these kind of things, this rhetoric creates an atmosphere of violence. In fact, El-Rufai should have been arrested, should have been really, really dealt with. You can't make such a statement and get away with it. The problem with this country is there's no law enforcement. You talk about, your reporter talked about agents being intimidated, party agents. I know party agents, my own party agents, ran away from polling booths because they were so afraid. They were attacked. They couldn't stay there anymore because some parties, APC, will have 10 agents, things that should not be allowed. Who has been arrested in Nassarawa? All the violence. And then you see the corruption. The collation agents saying, INEC agents saying, no problem. And everybody knows there's a problem. So, and then you have something that is so clear, happens all the time. Happened in the last election in the governorship in Ekiti. The number of registered voters will be 100. The number of votes will be 180. And then you will say this election is a valid one. It has invalidated the election. Simple as that. There's no need to keep fighting and going all over the place. If indeed INEC server has on record that Atiku had 1.6 million votes more than Buhari in this election, if I said, then it is obvious that Buhari did not win the election. Let us go and find out what that is and not continue and pretend as if all is well. So we have some fundamental problems, and the changes must begin with restructuring not only the government as a whole, but that is to say decentralization, basically. Look at what happens in our elections. I lived in the US for 20 years and was involved in elections. You study these things, you have to find a way to reduce violence and to reduce interference. There is nobody in the world, no society in the world that is peaceful. There is nowhere in the world where you will allow agents to come into polling booths and create disruption and get away with it, that they won't do it. It will be worse in the US. Law enforcement. All these talks that come snatch boxes, how many of them have been arrested? The president said, if anybody is caught snatching ballot boxes, they should shoot them. What about people who are thumbprinting, children who are voting for you? Should they not be arrested? So this is where the problem is. We have some serious problems, and until we begin to address them, INEC responsibility is too cumbersome. It is too complex for anybody, any organization. It's like the INEC chairman is in charge of so many things. You have election in Nassarawa. When you finish there, you now take it 2 miles away for collation. Why can't it be collated right there? Why can't it be collated? That result should be completed there and sent straight. You don't have to be carrying it, just going all over the place. That is why you have these problems. You must decentralize the process.
Mr. Peaerse, you've raised so many issues. The issue of collation was on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. That was not addressed. The issue of collation, as we saw in yesterday's election, where the Professor Tulum in Bauchi, on her way to deliver results, was attacked and shot. So that's a good point. You've also talked about INEC and their limitations and failings. But ultimately, the fault should lie with the political class, who are the ones manipulating INEC, who are the ones arming these miscreants that go around causing all this violence that we've seen. I want to ask you, though, SDP, in the aftermath of that imbroglio between your presidential candidate, Donald Duke, and then his contender, Professor Jerry Gana, SDP endorsed President Buhari, but you are quite vocally against some of his policies. Can you
Sure. First, the first part of your question, maybe comment, that the political class is responsible. Don't hold anybody responsible. You hold the law responsible. In any country, again, I put it to you, do you know any country where politicians will be allowed to manipulate election and get away with it and won't do it? They will, right?
Yes, they will absolutely.
All over the world, from beginning of time.
You do what you can get away with.
Yes. They are here today, gone tomorrow, gladiators. That's how they defined, right? Plato defines politics as war. War by other means. You must control it. So don't blame the political class, blame the law.
But who makes the laws and who enforces the laws and who...
This is why
the politicians manipulate the situation.
No. You are talking about politicians who are coming into office. You must talk about people who are in office who can change the law.
They are politicians.
But no, wait a minute. This is why we said the law must be changed. It doesn't matter. Whoever is in place now must begin to address these issues. Again, that is where it must begin. You know? So, after all, it is people who put politicians in place. So don't just blame the politicians, blame the people who vote them into office. Some of these politicians are known for their negative characteristics and personalities, and then we still vote for them. So
we can say,
everybody
based on some
is
of the
responsible.
things you've said, that
Yes.
some of these people, because I mean, we have inconclusive votes, we have the Electoral Tribunal 2 days ago that overturned. So sometimes it's not just about people voting people into office. It's about the fact that these people are, this is manipulation half the time. Sometimes they're not actually voting people into the office. So I think it's which you've said.
Yes.
So I think it's hard to just sort of say that part of it. I think what we're trying to understand here is the political class doesn't seem to take any responsibility for some of the things you've raised. But at the end of the day, we keep on throwing this back to the electorate. We've had politicians come and throw things back to the electorate.
It's not the electorate. I agree with you there. But when a political class, you know, we have to say, look, you have the National Assembly. They make the law. You have the presidency. This is what I'm talking about. This is where we must hold people responsible. Don't just say political class, meaning everybody. You know what I'm saying? Every politician, everybody running for office. No. When you are in a position to change the law, to make things better, that's who we want to hold. I just don't like the term political class, meaning everybody.
Okay, we'll talk about the executive and the legislative.
Yes.
But they are made up of politicians.
Sure.
But you didn't answer my question about endorsing...
Now, what happened in the SDP was that one faction endorsed Bwari, and the other faction endorsed Atiku. Didn't you know that?
I did.
Okay. Therefore, I am from that faction that endorsed Atiku. That's why we've been very critical of that endorsement. We were shocked, but we were told that the group that decided to endorse Bwari had a problem with finance, had a problem with getting support from Atiku financially, and so they went where they had financial support, which is terrible.
When you had your own presidential candidate?
We went in, well, you know, that issue of presidential candidate of SDP became a very dicey issue, because we really didn't have a candidate at the end of the day. We had two people who had basically nullified themselves. For instance, I was governorship candidate of the party in Lagos. Not once did I get any communication from either of the presidential candidates that were coming to campaign in Lagos. One day we woke up and we found that Donald Duke had some posters around the place. The state chairman didn't know about it. The state secretary didn't know about it. Before I became candidate, I was the organizing secretary of the party, didn't know about it. Candidate of the governorship candidate of the party was not told. So there was no real...
So what does that say about your party then? If there was this much disarray?
It is obvious that the party is in disarray. There's no doubt about it, and the party is fractured. When we came in, you know, I used to be in PDP. Professor Jerry Ghana, Professor Adeno, we all came, Mr. Shehu Gaban, who's the general secretary of the party, we all came from PDP with the ideal that we will form a third force, that we felt that the APC and the PDP had not done well enough for the country, and that we will all pull together within this structure called the CUPP, Coalition of United Political Parties, and we will support we'll come together to oppose this administration. That was the purpose. And then when we got there, things started to unravel when Atiku became the candidate of the PDP and chose his own running mate. You know, these are technical issues that we didn't plan for because, frankly, it became clear that you cannot be a presidential candidate in PDP and have a vice presidential candidate from another party. INEC would not recognize that. So, but once that happened, the coalition began to kind of wobble. That's what happened. And from then on, unfortunately, the PDP convention, it didn't help at all. We had hoped, frankly, going into the SDP, that we would have a candidate for president that would emerge from the middle belt, the North Central. That was the hope and strategy we had in mind in the SDP. And once that didn't happen, things fell apart because now Professor Jerry Gana challenges this Donald Duke in court, and from then on, we really didn't know where we were going.
So what's next for your party?
Well...
Or does your party still exist?
Pardon?
Does the party still exist?
Of course the party exists. They have, we had candidates for Senate, and some of them won actually in Ondo State and in Bauchi, other places. So the party will regroup, we will look at things again, and we will decide what to do with the two factions, how to reconcile the two. That is going to be the way forward now.
So well, I know you can only speak authoritatively about your party, SDP, but this wobbling that you described in SDP was witnessed in other parties that constituted the third force. What do you think is behind this? Whereas the parties that you, the third force, were working against, trying to bring new, fresh blood into governance in Nigeria, APC and PDP stood firm. They were able to stand firm in spite of their internal challenges. What happened to the parties that were supposed to form the third force?
Some of them had very good ideals. They had very good spokespersons, but I think they didn't have enough time to set up political structures. For instance, the former Minister for Education, sounded very convincing, but what I noticed was that she had no party anywhere. You couldn't go to any state and say, this is the party office, these are the party officials, because what you have to do is you have to set up structure from the ward level to the local government to the state, in every state.
So why did INEC register parties that were not able to meet that criteria? I think it's supposed to be 2/3 of the states you have to have offices.
This is part of the problem with INEC. INEC is a fraudulent organization. I mean, the earlier we understand that, the better. Why would they register so many political parties except for the purpose of weakening the system so that one party or the other will be able to get prominence? That was the purpose. INEC had no business registering all these political parties because they did not exist in reality. You just have somebody speaking, a noted person, yes, good ideas, but they couldn't have met the criteria because they didn't have offices and did not have officers in most states.
You have doled INEC a very harsh, you've been very harsh today. Do you think the issue around INEC is its lack of independence, because you've said it's a fraudulent organization, or do you think some of this is pure incompetence, because we've had this conversation in the past? What do you think the actual root cause is, and how do we begin to reform INEC?
Both. You know, I said that INEC must be decentralized. Nobody can hold that office with all those responsibilities. I saw the INEC chairman just before the presidential election when he had to postpone the election. And he was narrating all the things he has to do. And I'm saying, this is impossible. Nobody can do this, just as the federal government cannot work because it is overloaded. It's too convoluted. This is what we're talking about. So, yes, incompetence is there because the system, the structure is not efficient. So individuals cannot do much. Then there is also the business of corruption. And that has to do with the fact that the INEC chairman is appointed by the governor, by the president. And it's not just the INEC chairman, the INEC committee. Look, how do they operate in other countries? When we were getting ready for this governorship election, we got a visit from ECOWAS. And one of the people that came from ECOWAS was a lady from Ghana who was former chairperson of Ghana INEC. And I raised the point that INEC, you know, so long as INEC chairman is appointed by the president, we cannot expect that person to be actually independent. You know, oh, by the way, Atiku has been arguing that too. Let us hope that actually when he gets in office, he will implement these kind of things, that nobody should be responsible just to appoint INEC. But what is worse is, so she told me, she said, in Ghana, how they dealt with it was that even when the president appoints the chairman, the board will be broad enough to keep the chairman in check. How do you do that? That committee must be made up of political parties representing, if you had, let us say, 5 members of the board, 1 chairman and 4 members, 2 from PDP, 2 from APC, then you can have some kind of balance.
But some would argue that
Yes.
INEC has improved from the Obasanjo years, when Obasanjo, former President Obasanjo, appointed the chairman and appointed members of the board who he wanted. Subsequent presidents will appoint the chairman, but would canvass far and wide persons of unquestionable integrity, nominated by civil society organizations, other political parties, because INEC will tell you that they do not want political parties on the board of INEC, that they want persons of unquestionable integrity from various walks of life in Nigeria to try and represent Nigeria, not the political class. What's your view of that?
Well, you have seen the result of that, haven't you? There's nothing like persons of integrity. You must have an interest. Everybody has an interest. What's your interest? This is a question. This is a political structure. It has to be political, and it has to be balanced. It has to be balanced.
Former President Goodluck Jonathan, that threw the arena open and was soliciting suggestions, names from even APC, his arch rivals. Are you saying that once he appoints them, they become compromised?
Well, the point is that there are people in APC whose sympathies are also with the PDP. So it doesn't matter. The most important thing is you have to control. You know, this thing is a fight between political parties. This is what it is. They must be seen to balance each other out.
So you'd prefer them actually on the board of INEC?
I think that's the only way it can work. They
To
will
have
be
political
watching each other.
parties.
Yes. What are we talking about? So
But you've also
now
said
you have
something.
people what's their interest? How do you know who they represent?
But you've also said something that I would like you to clarify. You said some members of APC have the sympathies of people in PDP. Can you just clarify that, please?
But you know that. I mean, look, we shift
Some
from
people
here,
at home might not know that.
Where we shift from here to there.
Well, that's why.
Of,
so that takes me now to my next question, which is, if you're saying that that these party members, politicians shift, then when they're on the board, they can shift while they're on the board.
No. When they're on the board, they are representing their parties.
But because when they're not on the board, they could shift, so you can be a board member and still shift your loyalties.
When they leave one party, they go to another party. They are not going to be in their party and be representing another party, because that other party is already represented on that board. So it's a different thing. But
it's quite flawed. I mean, if we were to, I mean, this could easily become extremely flawed because of the way our politicians' sympathies change very quickly.
Okay. I won't argue that point, but we must give something else a try.
Yes.
We have failed
I think
with this idea of people.
Yes.
There's nobody who doesn't have an interest. You know, all this business of getting professors to be returning officers, as if professors are not Nigerians with interest. Who knows their interest?
So they just
and I know many professors, you know, because I've been in the university system now for the last 10 years, teaching at University of Lagos. There are many professors that we know their political leanings. And then they go and put them there, and then the Nigerians think, oh, they're professors. Many of them are there. How much training did they get before they went for this job? I mean, this whole thing is a joke.
So apart from that facade of neutrality that you're trying to do away with, you also talked about how INEC is centralized. Do you have a model in mind to decentralize INEC? How would that work in practical terms?
Well, you know, I gave an example of results in Nassarawa, having to go to some collation center, God knows how many miles away. And then while you are carrying it, the thing is disrupted, people are attacked on the way. So everything must be localized. That's the point I'm making. It must be localized, as well as it must be proper, there must be proper representation. You know, proper representation. It will reduce. There's no perfection anywhere, but it will reduce this type of flip-flop that we have now. So yes, it has to be decentralized. The chairman of INEC cannot handle everything from determining the qualification of political parties. They're going into ward elections to go and evaluate ward elections. You know they do that? They send INEC to our ward elections, to the local government elections. I mean, all over the place. Same INEC. There should be one group handling ward. In fact, that's not the business of INEC, in my opinion. They shouldn't be involved in all of that. Let the political parties determine what they want to do, then present it to INEC. And then you stick with that, you know? So there's so many ways in which it has to be decentralized. You cannot have elections in the southeast, and then everything must now come to Abuja. What is the meaning of this?
Which, I mean, so what you're saying is that INEC is encumbered and INEC is doing too many things, and trying to be too many things to too many people.
And therefore cannot be efficient.
What role can technology play in this? I mean, one of the things we've talked about is using more electronics when it comes to voting.
Electronic voting is a good idea. But look at the way they manipulate every effort. Card readers don't work, but where they don't work, people are still allowed to vote. I mean, in some places, they don't even bother with card readers. So technology is only as good as the people who are applying it. It is important to have technology. For instance, in every every state, first the state itself must be broken down so that every local government handles its own business in the local government. The result of the presidential election in Ikorodu local government is totally from Ikorodu local government and doesn't have to be, they don't have to take the results to Burial Street in Yaba. They don't have to do that. But the question of technology, as soon as the results are completed in that local government, it is transmitted to the center right away by technology, not carrying paper all over the place, electronically, straight away. You know how you vote in the US? You just go, and as soon as you vote, it's ready. It is there.
I mean, I know that we continually use the U.S. as sort of this model, but the U.S. also has had issues around counting votes. I mean, there were issues of the hanging Chad during the during the Al Gore and Bush elections.
Look, I was actually there at the time and participated in that election. Let me tell you, we have said no system is perfect.
Fair enough.
Even democracy. I remember what Winston Churchill said about democracy. It's a terrible system, but it's the best we have. That is the point. Every time you say the U.S., you say, this is not the U.S. But we have to borrow from somewhere where things are better than they are here. Look at the economy. You know, if you don't borrow from where we're running a capitalist system, and we don't want to embrace capitalism. We don't want to study and understand the way capitalism works. The economy will collapse. We haven't seen anything yet. If we continue this way, the naira will be going. You know, it got to about 500 plus to the $1.
In 2016, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But now I want to talk to you about the arrests. Earlier, we're talking about law enforcement. Over 1,000 arrests were made, about 300 during the presidential elections, even more on March 9th, the governorship elections. But none of those arrests were of the political class, that term you dislike. Who was arrested were the puppets, not the puppeteers. Sure. What can be done to disincentivize these politicians, these gangsters in politics? Because there's just, the fact of the matter is, it needs to be made less worthwhile to kill, to maim, to destroy.
What must be done is that we must enforce the law. That is to say, we must emphasize that nobody is above the law. I would say to you today that Buhari's inability to prove that he has his school cert had nullified him from being president. He should not have been contesting this election. If you cannot enforce the law at the top, don't talk about enforcing the law at all. This is where Nigeria's problem is. Let me tell you.
You didn't see the photo up with the WAEC officials and the president and the certificate?
Which certificate? Where did they get that from? About 50, 100 years ago certificate. They still have it. Look, the point I'm making is this. The point I'm making is this. If you cannot enforce the law without integrity, there's nothing. Look, somebody who has EFCC problem is a member of PDP. Tomorrow he goes to APC and the problem is over. Even somebody who was alleged to have committed murder, alleged, mark you, and the case is in court. All of a sudden, he moves from PDP to APC. We don't hear about the case anymore. And you're talking about law and order. The president says lawyers should not defend criminals. Who is the criminal? How do you know somebody is a criminal before they are proven to be a criminal? So, look, the reason why you cannot arrest any member of the political class, that is to say any well-known politician, is because they are protected by their leaders in the party. That's the problem. That is the problem. So unless we go beyond that, we're not making any progress. And by the way, this is the reason why we say government should be decentralized, so that states should have a lot of independence. If we're running a federalist system, the states should be able to determine. Notice that there's a lot of corruption in Nigeria, but the greatest deal of corruption is at the federal level. It is very easy. Do you know how many civil servants working for the federal government now live and work in America and Canada. 6 months over there, 4 months over here, and 2 months vacation. It's easy, much easier. But if you had a state situation where they had their control, even now, very difficult for you to work for state government and not be around. I'm not saying there's no corruption, but we have to keep limiting it, reducing it. And that's how we can improve. The economy itself will go nowhere unless we decentralize and we have state autonomy, have direct access to their natural resources, and have enough power to be able to borrow directly from foreign countries and develop their own partnerships. We can move. The economy is moribund. So these are things that we must do to improve the quality of life in this country. You know, once you see a leader and you see their limitations, you know the direction that country is going. It's obvious. You have a leader who is a known, clear tribalist, and you think you're going to make progress, that you have peace. The minute you get into office, violence everywhere. Violence everywhere.
So I wanted to ask you something else before you went into this, before you went on the issue of leadership, and therefore I'm going to ask you about President Buhari's next term in office, what we should expect from that. And one of the key themes that was in the headlines today, which we'll go through when we go through the papers, is that the EU yesterday said, you must unify Nigeria. Do you believe that this president can unify Nigeria?
President Buhari does not have the moral capacity to unify this country. One of the first things he said when he got into office in 2015, I think it was in South Africa, they asked him how he was going to unify this country, govern this country, and he said, with his own mouth, that his main responsibility is to those who voted for him 97%, not those who voted 5%. Immediately he said that problems broke out in the southeast. All sorts of groups started coming up to say, this man doesn't care. And then he put it into action. The first set of appointments he made, 28 appointments, I remember clearly. 21 were from the north, 7 from north central, 7 from northeast, 7 from northwest, 21, and only 4 from south-south, and only 3 from southwest, and 0 from southeast. Those are indications at that time. Now, you've heard the question of Maita Allah, herdsmen. What has been the position of the president on these issues? Wishy-washy. It is clear to expect nothing but more problems in the next administration. That is, if he remains the president, because we still have to see what happens with the court case that Atiku has brought.
Do you believe that Atiku will get a fair hearing, and do you believe that he'll succeed at his petition?
I don't know if he will get a fair hearing, but he's going to put up a great fight. And if indeed he has this record, it's going to be very difficult for Bwari to get away with it, because if the INEC server has it on record that actually the results are not what they published, that Atiku won by 1.6 million votes, and that the international community has this record also, I think we'll see how it goes in court. I just hope, that for the sake of not only unity in Nigeria, but the sake of democracy. Let us begin with that and the rule of law. Let us see what this case is about. I'm happy that Atiku brought this up, so that, in fact, I learned a lot from this myself, and I told my people, I said, look, anytime we are going into election, just keep a record. Bring me your own record. Then let's see what happens. Whatever they want to publish, okay, we will challenge it in court, and let's see what happens. You know, so I'm hopeful. And the way you see these challenges all over the country now with the governorship, I think people are realizing that you can't just get away with it. You can't just declare anybody. If it was not for the challenge that Atiku brought up, I think all these inconclusive elections would have been conclusive by now in favor of APC.
Well, what do you make of the results that have come out so far, like Plateau State, where APC was in the lead and it was declared inconclusive? The rerun has happened, and APC's Simon Lalong has been declared the winner. And also Benue State, where reports are that Jime of APC has conceded to incumbent Samuel Autumn of PDP. What do you make of those so far?
I have to tell you, I am never a person to say it has to be this or it has to be that. All I want is the truth. Let it be the truth. If it is APC that won, let us hope actually they won. That's all. That's all. In Benue, it was overwhelming. You see, the point I'm making is that it is a shame that only where a PDP wins overwhelmingly, where another party wins overwhelmingly, will they declare the result for that party. Where there's a slim margin of victory in favor of another party, if the margin is slim, they're going to declare for APC. I hope that is not the case. That's all. That's all we're saying. And you know the case in Osun, it's gone back, and the tribunal has ruled in favor of Adeleke. If it is appealed, let us see what the appeal will say, because the APC has a right to appeal.
Which they're exercising.
Yes. Now, let us see what happens, because at the first go, it appeared to me that there was no need for any rerun. Once you conclude the election, you count the results, you saw now that this is, you've added the points. How can you now go, and that was the end of the election. Now you declare another election in a few polling booths just because somebody else won and the APC candidate didn't win? I'm glad the tribunal has come up with something that is reasonable, democratic, and lawful. Let us hope that appeal court will uphold that result in favor of Adeleke.
I want to take us back a little bit to the issue around security around the elections. And the reason why is because I wanted to ask you this earlier, but we got veered off. I wanted to talk to you about the role of the military in the last few elections. One of the things you said was actually some of your party members had to run away from polling units because they didn't feel safe. We've had the debate back and forth. I would love to get your take on the role the military is playing in our elections, and actually the role they play at polling units during the last two elections. What is your take, and what dangers, or maybe no dangers, do you see in this involvement?
The Army doesn't have any business in an election. I don't understand why, but I guess the problem is we don't have enough security in the country. Lagos State, with about 20 million people, only has, I think, is it 280,000 or 28,000 police? If you compare it to more advanced countries, which is where we want to go, right?
We have to.
Yes, for our own good, right? For our own development, for our own safety. we need to beef up the police, and we need to depoliticize police recruitment. You know, these are things we must do. This is why I've always felt that decentralization, this so-called restructuring, is going to help. If you have state police, you have, first, it will increase employment, and it will certainly improve security. You cannot have a law enacted in Benue, for instance, no open grazing. The law of the state is no open grazing. The federal government, because the state has no ability to enforce the law, it has to look up to the federal government. Federal government comes in with troops who say, let them open graze, let them do what they want to do. You know, so states must have their own police. That will increase the number of security. Therefore, when you are having election in a state between the federal police and the state police, they'll be able to handle it. This is not war. What is the army doing? That's why they can't do anything. What can the army do? Somebody snatch a box, unless you want to shoot them. Somebody is thumb printing. How is the army going to stop that? These are criminal activities, you know? But so the army is just intimidating people. Some people will look at it and say there's no point going there in case they get shot. They're just so scared. So, and then who is deploying this army? The government in power. That is why Bwari himself challenged this in 2015 and took it to court and won that the military should not be used in the elections. Now he's in power, takes all the military.
So do you think the benefits of the state police outweigh the potential abuse? That risk has been highlighted, that state governors can then abuse that privilege.
The abuse of security and law and order at the federal level now is so grave that what will happen at the local government, at the state level, will be minimal compared to that. So, yes, indeed, I agree. And, you know, once you have states having more control over their resources, over their politics, over their security, a lot of things will change. A lot of things will change. The governors will try to abuse, but guess what? It will not be as obvious as it is now. If your state enacts a law, then that state must be able to enforce that law. Otherwise, you stand a good chance of that state enforcing the law, much more so than you enact a law in your state and then hope for a maybe hostile, maybe not so friendly federal government to come and enforce the law. And then you are bringing in, it's like an army of occupation. Can you bring some policeman from Adamawa to come and be policing in Lagos State? Come on. Doesn't understand the language, doesn't understand the culture. The people look at him as an army of occupation. Let's face it. Even in a country where they're more homogeneous, they still feel that, look, a black community in America, you can't have all these white police, you know. You can't have police who don't live in the neighborhood, who don't know anything about the culture. When you see somebody running, you think he's a criminal. Whereas, if you understood the culture, you know. So, this is why Jonathan said at one point that, that if you had state police in Bayelsa, they will be able to police people who run into the creeks because they can swim. When you go and bring somebody from Bauchi to come and, when he gets there, looks at the guy run into the creek, he runs back. Say, leave him alone. So, yes.
Okay. We're going to go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue with Dr. Adetokunbo Peaerse. Thank you very much for being here today.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Tundu Abiola.
I'm Biola Alabi.
Dr. Adetokunbo Peaerse, SDP Chieftain and former SDP Governorship candidate of Lagos State, is still with us in the studio as we continue our discussion on the supplementary polls that was conducted yesterday. Thank you for staying with us, sir.
Thank you.
Before we went on break, you had started to talk a lot about sort of state structures. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Lagos State as someone that actually ran for governorship in Lagos State. Lagos State has become almost a one-party state. As someone that ran as a third party in Lagos, what do you think the political structure is long-term for Lagos? Do you think any other party besides APC can come in and actually win an election in Lagos?
I think another party can win. You remember in 2015, Abaji came close to winning that election. Unfortunately, this time round in 2019, it seemed that Tinubu, realizing the weakness of his candidate, very well known at the beginning, just bombarded the whole place with campaign materials, and then come election day, threats and intimidation and violence. And so it's obvious that APC realized that it had to resort to all of these negative, destructive tactics to win. Therefore, I think that once certain improvements in the system are in place, then things can change. If you didn't have the intimidation and the scare people got in the presidential election, then the governorship election would have gone the other way. Notice that in spite of all the manipulation, Atiku still won, I think, about 48% of the vote. So it shows you that it's doable. Actually, I was talking to Abaji after the presidential, and we agreed that the result of the PDP candidate for President Atiku in Lagos shows that the governorship is winnable. And that's what APC realized and then redoubled on its manipulation and intimidation and threats and violence for the governorship, so that people didn't bother to come out. Unfortunately, it also affected the morale of the PDP. And they too basically kind of just gave up. But it had to do with that, that intimidation. And so once those kind of things are not there anymore, for instance, if we had a restructured system whereby the state has its own authority and has direct control of its own resources, I think you begin to see a difference. You begin to see a difference. And since we had the 2015 election, that's an indication that it is possible. It is possible also because of the results that Atiku got for the PDP in the presidential. So the result of the governorship is no real indication of the strength and weakness of the PDP and the APC. It's just that people just didn't bother.
Okay. We're going to actually come back to you and talk more about that. Right now, we're going to go live to our Rise News correspondent, Charles Owako, who's reporting from Sokoto State with updates on the election. Hi, Charles. You're normally with us here today, but you are out in the field in Sokoto. Can you help us understand and give us a recap of the supplementary election day activities in Sokoto? Charles.
Well, thank you so much, Biola. Yes, it's been very, very eventful supplementary elections. As a matter of fact, we arrived Sokoto today just by 12:30 p.m. because we had to take a connecting flight from Abuja. There was no direct flight to Sokoto from Lagos. So we got into the action right away. We got into a polling unit, very busy one. The Sultan is the traditional and religious head of the caliphate. This is Sokoto Caliphate we're talking about. We got to Malan Dan Altar polling unit somewhere around the Sultan's palace, and it was a beehive of activities. We met so many situations, some of them known, conventional, some of them surprising to us, because I honestly speaking, I never knew that elections, aspects of Nigerian elections are conducted that way. For instance, let me start from the aspect of where party agents, were assisting voters to thumbprints to identify which party of their choice, on the ballot paper, and then assisting them, to do the thumbprinting and then going to to drop it into the ballot box. So that was surprising to me, because I never really knew that. And coming into these elections, the build-up to these elections was also characterized by, what people have always said about underage voting being rampant, being very, very prevalent in this part of the country. Yesterday, yes, I saw, I saw extenuating, evidence of that. It was out there. So many minors around that polling unit. I'm using that polling unit as a case study right now. The elections happened. Bits and pieces of it happened across 22 local government areas of Sokoto State. Some of them in one ward, some of them 3, 5 wards, and all of that. So, but this particular one, we were lucky enough to chance on, a polling unit that was sizable enough, and within that particular polling area, you had so many voting points, where people went, got accredited, and then cast their votes. So I had to take up, this particular issue of underage voting, with some election observers I saw. I actually spoke to party agents, the agents of the two major political parties, the PDP and APC. They gave me their text on all of this, but I felt that for a more dispassionate point of view, on this thorny issue, I had to speak to someone that's a bit removed from the system. So I had to speak to, the election observers, and they somehow laid credence to it. They said that this is something they've noticed. Ever since they started monitoring the process, they've noticed it's been happening and all of that. And they took up the issue with some of the kids, and they asked them, why are you? Don't you know that it's not your time yet to vote? And some of them answered and said, well, they were being induced, that they've been promised money, to vote, and all of that. So they were like, how much were you promised? And some of them said they were promised as little as 7,000 or 5,000. Have you been paid this money? No, but we were promised that once we pay, once we vote, we are going to be paid. So that was how bad it was. And then again, to the issue of violence. Right there before us, people were getting into fights, fisticuffs, fighting, and then making up, coming back to the queue, and it was a sort of situation that continued to swing this way and that. And then the INEC staff on ground, you had them sitting there waiting patiently, attending, to the pressing crowd, the crowd that was bearing down on them. You could see that they were a bit harassed, but it was a situation they couldn't do anything about. But the pace of the voting was very, very slow, and I wondered why it was like that. Because knowing fully well, because I'm talking about after 1 p.m. now going to 2, and you still had a very long line, or rather long queues, people waiting to vote. And I said, I wanted to know from that same election observer, why do you think that this process is this slow? And he said, well, the politicians are up to their games again. He laid it on the doorstep of the politicians and said, well, they're actually trying to midwife they're actually trying to manipulate this particular process, slow down the process, let it get to that stage in the evening, and with the onset of darkness, they will now, inception of these general elections, and that disrupt the process, cut away the ballot box and all of that. But on the whole, I have to report that Sokoto State has been relatively very, very Kano, where it's been all-out war. Sokoto State has been on a very peaceful footing, and I think I have to put it down to the people themselves. This is my first time in Sokoto, but from the little experience I've had, I think the people here are very, very, very responsible. That's the way they come across to me. You have people that are always preaching peace, always trying to, say, after this election, there's going to be life. We're going to move on from this process. It's all about us. Let's try to get the best people in there, to do the work. So that's a bit of a picture of what we've observed, ever since we arrived here yesterday, when we want to talk about activities that we have observed. Over to you now.
Thank you, Charles, for that very clear picture. You witnessed the whole gamut of electoral malpractice, but there's also that silver lining of the positive attitude of the people and the voter engagement in Sokoto. So we gather that collation and announcement of results started last night. Can you bring us up to date on that? We also know that collation was suspended until 9 a.m. So what's happening now?
Yeah, thank you, Tundu. Right now, as I filing this report, we actually can see behind me, if I don't know whether you're getting the picture right there, that's the high table. That's from that point that the collation and the announcement of results have been going on since 11 after, I think, 10 p.m. last night. So it's been going on, being supervised as superintended by Professor Fatima Mukhtar. She's the returning officer, Sokoto State returning officer, INEC returning officer. She's from the Federal University, Dutse, in Jigawa State. So, it's continued all night from around that 10 p.m. down to, after 3 a.m., early this morning, 21 out of 22 local government areas where these supplementary elections held in Sokoto State, the results of those local governments were collected and declared from that point there until about 3:30 this morning, when the returning officer announced that, well, the remaining local government area, it's called Kebe local government area, that the result from that local government area has been held up because of a combination of circumstances, and because of that, they are trying to sort that issue out, and that because of that too, that she appealed to everybody to take a break, go back, and then come back by 9 this morning. So she said that by 9 o'clock this morning, that's just some minutes ago, that the results from that particular local government, Kebe local government area, which I learned is a stronghold of the All Progressives Congress, that those results would have been delivered into this hall. The hall itself is called the Atohiri Bafarawa Center. That's where INEC has been doing, it's from this one that INEC has been doing, its acquitting its responsibilities and all of that. So 9 o'clock on the dot, she was here. So I think that says a lot about the kind of person that she is. She was here. The hall has been opened up, and as you can see, people are gradually, the hall is gradually filling out. People are taking their seats, stakeholders, I think people who still have, a stake in the remaining result that's yet to be declared, because this is very, very essential. I think it's going to be very, very strategic as to who eventually, emerges as the winner of this particular process, between Right Honorable Aminu Tambuwal, who is the executive governor for Sokoto State, and his All Progressive Congress rival, Aliyu Sokoto, Madam Aliyu Sokoto. So that's where we are right now. At this point, that's where we are right now, waiting, for the result of that particular local government to be declared. I'm sure that once that result gets collected and announced, then we enter the final leg of this entire process, which is, a summarization of this whole thing, signing of the necessary forms, that needs to give legal backing to everything that has been done here since last night. Then after that, then we'll get to that very moment, the moment that everybody's been waiting for, and that's the declaration of the ultimate winner of the governorship election in Sokoto State. Back to you now.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you also for giving us a good lay of the land there. We can see observers, we can see the professor, as you said, the returning officer. We can also see the hall. There's quite a lot of people in the hall and a lot of activities in the hall. As you sort of give us a good lay of the land, and now that people are, do you get a sense of anticipation on who ultimately is going to be declared the governor of the state? Or do you get the sense that people are just patiently waiting for the process to play out? Any sense of impatience? Are people getting impatient as this process has gone on and on and on and on, and even we're tired of talking about it? But do you get the sense that people are, do you get that on the ground there? I mean, people look pretty laid back. I would love to get your take.
Well, before we entered the hall, some 20-25 minutes ago, that was when the hall was the door to this particular hall was opened. We didn't have much people around, especially stakeholders, especially the supporters. Normally, under this kind of a situation, you expect the supporters of the two major political parties to be out there, making their presence felt and all of that. I can tell you authoritatively that we haven't had that kind of situation. In fact, the Tohiru Bafarawa Center, where these results are being declared, the surroundings, the environment has been very, very peaceful. We hardly saw, any people massing or outside there, gathering, or people, congregating with the intention of making trouble and all of that. So I guess because the lion's share, or the lion's share of this process has been taken care of. Like I said, 21 out of 22 local governments have been declared. So I don't see a reason why maybe people from the already declared constituencies and local governments would have to come to this place yet again. I guess they have to hang out wherever they are, waiting for the final result to be declared. So it's been very peaceful around here. People are going about their normal businesses. It's a very sleepy town, as a matter of fact. But I tell you, with the passage of time, it's going to become very hot, because that's how I have to report that again. Sokoto is an extremely hot, place to be in. It's just at this point where we are, it's less than an hour, to the border between Nigeria and Niger Republic. And in Niger Republic, that's where Sahara Desert starts. And so it's very, very hot here. But the environment here has been very cool, as in comparison. People are moving around their normal businesses. I don't know how the situation is going to pan out as we move along. Maybe people are still going to troop into this place in anticipation of that final announcement. But for now, it's very peaceful. I can report that to you now. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that thorough report from Sokoto State.
It's time now for a short break. Okay, well,
Mr.
actually,
Peaerse.
before we go on a break, we're going to talk to you a little bit to get your take on what you've just seen happening in Sokoto.
I noticed that you were amused when Charles used that euphemism of assisting, the party agents assisting people to vote.
Well, no amount of peace that Charles may have talked about can, in my opinion, reduce the level of election malpractice that he also observed. Underage voting, people being assisted, vote buying, which was rampant in Lagos, was terrible. It was like, look, I have a neighbor, small Hausa boy, about 12 years old, came to me, he said, Papa, you have to give us money for election. My mother said I should collect election money. I said, what? Election money? For what? He said, for us to go and vote. It's terrible. It's terrible. So I think that what's going on in Sokoto is the same that's going on everywhere else, different forms. And until the system is changed, you know, as I saw the clips there, I couldn't help but think of the way we vote in the US. You leave work on your break or just take a break. Half an hour, you go and vote, come back, you know. And what are all those people doing there? The results have been declared in the polling booth. The sheet of paper is there. You know what I'm saying? So what is the collation officer collating? I don't understand this.
All the...
Yeah, but how many pieces of paper? Just total it. You see, so the point is, we have left room for a lot of manipulation, a lot of rigging, and we have to clean up the system. You have to simplify it. You have to codify it. You know, this is decentralization that I'm talking about. There's no need for all those. You know, all those people there normally should be in the office, the campaign office of the candidate, waiting for INEC to send the result to them.
Well, in America, well, those of us who are not eligible to vote in America, but we watch it on TV, that is what happens. It's the campaign offices that are crowded.
Because...
And that's where the tension is, actually.
Yeah,
so
that's
if there's
where it
any
should
tension,
be.
it's there. Not in this place where
they're just waiting
both
for the
supporters...
results. You know, I can tell you how it's done from the first step. You come in, like you're sitting down, I come in, you have in front of you a list of registered voters from who are supposed to vote in that ward, in that polling unit. There may be about 10 polling booths there. You check. Once my name is there, I show you my PVC, the equivalent,
Sure.
whatever
Your
that
identification.
is, identification. You check, you mark my name, you give me my ballot. I go and vote into the polling booth.
Yeah.
Actually, you don't give me anything. In the US,
Yeah, it's there.
I just walk into the polling booth, and I flick, I decide who I want to vote for. It's all listed there. But we can do another version of that here, which is to say, give me my polling papers. I go in there, I put it in, finish. At the end of the exercise, each polling, you are now, you know, you go in, you collect all the stuff, the two of you, you check it, you collate it, and then actually in the US, you put it in this envelope that's already there. That's the form. That's the result is there.
But I'm a regular voter
And you
in Nigeria.
give it to the police.
But
The
that's
police will
what
take it.
happens in Nigeria. It's just that in America you can do it whenever you like. You have like a month,
There's not
a
a full
week,
day,
depending
yeah.
on the state. Yeah.
No,
but
to
they,
vote?
yes, it depends on the state. Yes, you can vote. It's not all on that one day where you have a mad rush in America. In Nigeria, it's on one day. But you do present your identification, which is your PVC. They give you a ballot paper. You vote. What Charles observed.
No. Here, you present your PVC first. Everybody lining up
Yes, because
for
it's
hours.
1 day. Yes.
For hours.
Yes.
No. It's not because it's 1 day. It's 1 day in the US too.
No, it's
in
not.
every state.
You can, you can vote in advance in some states.
No. Look. I lived there for 20 years. I was part of the system. Hardly anybody votes in advance. Okay? Hardly.
But you have the option to.
You have the
You
option,
can mail
but
in your vote,
no.
yes.
The point I'm making is don't say it's because it's 1 day or 2 days. No. It's 1 day. We all vote 1 day. But the point is, it is staggered. You have the whole day. The reason why we line up here is because you are lining up to pick up paper, go from here to there, and it's in the open. You know, look, the whole thing is a farce. You line up.
Yes, but the U.S. system is not perfect either. It
No,
also
no.
is not 1 day. You can vote by mail. You can vote in advance, depending on the state. But that's not even the point. The
There's
U.S.
early
system,
voting in some
yes,
states. But
that's not even the
kind of not what
point.
we're talking
That is
about.
not
the point.
I think one of the things we're talking about, and one of the points you made also, is that there's a huge inconvenience. There's a huge logistical issue.
stressful.
These are the things
It's
that make
stressful.
the process full of errors. There's too much room for error
And
in
it's
our
just very
process.
There is no
stressful.
need for 10 officials, INEC, you pick up the paper, you put it in, that's the end of it. The paper itself is so cumbersome, but you put it in the box. At the end of the day, all that paperwork, that's the result. That result should be declared right there. You know what I'm saying? Right there. And then you give it to one policeman, puts it in an envelope, you give it to, and they take it to the collation center. And in the collation center, what you have there, nobody comes into the collation center. Only INEC officials who are going to, they have the results. They will now collate everything. That's why I said that board must be fully represented by the parties involved.
Because right now, that system will not work here. There's too much room for manipulation. There's too much room for people to cook results, write whatever they want. You have people not showing up to vote at the polling stations. The extra ballot papers get thumbprinted with whatever you want. It's just messy.
People can be assisted.
Exactly.
Guess what? Guess what?
Yes.
This is all we're saying that have to stop. Do you know what happens to you if you snatch a ballot box in the US or go and steal some paperwork? You will be handcuffed.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure anyone would
I don't
even
think
try.
I've even heard of anybody.
But Dr. Tokunbo,
Handcuffed, you are going to jail.
Doc, I want to just say thank you so much for spending the day with us. This has been really a great conversation, not only reflective, but as we look at the future on what we have to do, what type of reforms, how INEC becomes independent, and truly how we push democracy forward in Nigeria and continue to have that conversation. And I think for us to continue to have a democratic system that we can build, that we'll be proud of, we have to continue to challenge ourselves and challenge each other. So thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.